So after a couple of weeks at home, watching the weather every day, hoping for things to change, for the pattern to change, it appeared to be changing. And day after day, I would do a projection of, if I were there today, here's how I think the next week would go. And it kept turning up pretty good. Like I could fly every other day, maybe a 100-mile flight each day that I flew. So we decided, let's go back. We spent 3 days driving out. Those 3 days, the soaring forecast for Brownfield looked great. And then we got to Brownfield, and it wasn't great. So we spent a few days here. I flew on Sunday, had some engine issues. Everything was fine. It was working fine. I had failed to reset the charge level properly, so it reported me having less charge than 100%. That threw me. I've since learned more about the system. I also got a high temperature alarm on one of the components that I've since learned was really not a concern, and a low voltage warning that might have been due to me having kept the batteries cooler, which I thought was a good idea. So that flight was a bust, a 19-minute flight. Not sure it was a good day anyway, but then it was a few more days of waiting for the weather to open up and give me the chance to get out of Brownfield.
Welcome to Soar America. It's Eric, our pilot, who is going to attempt to fly his glider from coast to coast in a series of connected flights, and only be the second person to achieve this goal. Join us as we soar, camp, and drive across America.
So I chose to make the next flight from Brownfield instead of from Remembrance, where I had last landed, for a few reasons. The main reason is just that the runway itself is better at Brownfield. It's 25 feet wide, or 75 feet wide instead of 50. 50 is just barely wider than my wings, and if a wingtip dropped, it could hit the runway lights easily, and they were just right at the edges of the runway. Plus, I think the Brownfield runway is like 50% longer. So a longer, wider runway like that is much easier and safer. But also, the route out of the area was better to the southeast. I was sort of boxed into a corner up around Lubbock at Remembrance. So the easier way out would probably be to the southeast from Brownfield. That was a little bit of a concern. It was also a little bit of a factor that Brownfield is a public airport. It's just right off the side of a paved road, no gate, easy access. Don't have to call ahead and let anyone know you're coming. The Remembrance, while they were very welcoming, is a private field. You have to drive through a quarter-mile of gravel through their property to get there, and I would feel obligated to let them know we were coming. So just a few reasons. So on this third flight from Brownfield, I wasn't terribly optimistic. There was a 10 to 20 mile per hour wind that I needed to fly straight into. The forecast was for lift to be barely high enough for me to make the jump to the next airport, so to break away from Brownfield. And the forecast was for there to be little or no cumulus. So I asked Julie and Diane to not prepare to leave until they got the message from me that I had the next airport made. So leave the hangar open, leave the tow rope out, leave the wing stands out, everything. Just sit around, because I expected there's a 50-50 chance I'm coming back. Just broke 8,000 feet for the first time. Not quite 5,000 feet above the ground, but the day's going well so far, especially for as blue as it is. I'd like 1,000 or 2,000 feet being comfortable making the jump from Brownfield to the next good place I'd like to land. I'm only 8.5 miles from Brownfield, but I have a stiff 15 to 20 mile per hour headwind, so progress is slow. I don't think I'll get much higher in this thermal. In fact, I'm going to head out and move on. This is promising. This is my third flight from Brownfield. 3 different days. Sure would like to land somewhere else. I just used a little trick that often comes in handy in the blue, but even comes in handy when there are cumulus clouds marking thermals. I was a little desperate and had turned crosswind because I was about to get out of reach of Brownfield without quite having La Mesa, the next airport, made. I found a little thermal. It was only giving me 1 or 2 knots and turned to 0, but I stayed with it for a few circles on purpose. 1, just to buy time and see if something better happened, but 2, so that if it petered out, then I would turn straight into the wind and fly up the spirals drawn on my map, showing me exactly the drift I just took in those few circles. And sure enough, I flew straight up that spiral, and within 30 seconds flew into this better thermal and have gained about 700 more feet in it, and that is enough to give me the next airport on glide. Nifty little trick. I took that last thermal to 9,000 feet, and that was the one that let me get away from Brownfield. So I'm now on the way to the next airport, the first one beyond Brownfield, and it's La Mesa. I'm about 10 miles away and have it made with 3,000 feet, so unless something really strange happens, I'll at least make it there. And next I'll be headed toward Big Spring, which is currently about 53 miles away, so I need 4,000 or 5,000 more feet along the way to be able to make that jump. But I'm really happy to have made it away from Brownfield finally.
Well,
it's 4:30 in the afternoon. Sunset is almost 9 o'clock. So I have some time left, hopefully. I'm just now approaching the tiniest of wispy cumulus clouds, but it's the only ones I've had within reach. I think this isn't within reach yet today. It seems like the farther I fly in this direction, the farther the line of a few cumulus moves away from me. I'm flying southeast into the wind. My airport of choice, La Mesa, is behind me right now. I have it made with 3,000 feet, but I need 3,000 or 4,000 feet to make it to the next one. So I really need some altitude here. Well, those 2 little wispy clouds were marking a decent thermal. Stopped and climbed there, got 1,500 to 2,000 feet out of it. The clouds never really became much, but the thermal was good. From there I headed a little east, crossed to the path to my next airport, but more toward the clouds. Headed toward a tiny wispy cloud that was dissipating, and got there and found a thermal under it. Climbed and just reached the highest I've been so far, about 9,400 feet. But I still lack 1,500 or 2,000 before I'm comfortable that I have Big Spring reached. Big Spring is now 38 miles away, almost straight ahead, and good for me. There's a decent looking cloud on this line, but in all likelihood it'll be gone by the time I get there. But it still at least marks where something good's happening, so sometimes if one cloud forms there, another one will shortly after it. I just took a climb to almost 9,000 feet. I'm 28 miles from Big Spring. It's straight into the wind. Right now the wind's not that bad. It's around 14 miles an hour. The computer says I have Big Spring made with 700 feet. That's not enough for comfort. Flying through sync could cost me that much. I really would rather not arrive at only 700 feet above the ground anyway. But I still have La Mesa behind me made with 3,400 feet. So as long as I can find another 1,000 or so feet before my glide to La Mesa gets too poor, I can make this jump. There's no guarantee of that though. Seems like the clouds are just running from me all day long. It's now a little after 5:30. Well, I just came to a real decision point. It was about 10 miles short of Big Spring, had it easily made, but conditions toward Big Spring were looking pretty poor. And there was a pretty big jump to the east. I wanted to turn left and go toward my next airport. There was a pretty big jump to the east to the next clouds, and I didn't quite have the next airport made, but I decided to spend some of my insurance on Big Spring and head east. And as I did, a little wispy started forming on my way to the cloud that was far away. So now I'm climbing, and if all goes well, I should be able to take this one high enough to have the next airport, which is in Colorado City, made, and that's almost due east of here by about 33 miles. So I'm happy to have found this one. It is 6:15. Well, it's feeling pretty late. The lift is getting scarce and weak. It's about 1/4 till 7 o'clock. So it's a little more than 2 hours from sunset. Sometimes it'll be good later than this, but it's feeling late. So my airport of choice right now is there, Colorado City. Easily have it made. But I'd like to find 2,000 or 3,000 more feet of altitude and make it 29 miles to Avenger Airport near Sweetwater. That would be a better runway for self-launching, and it'd be more distance, but not looking too likely. Over the last half hour, I've found almost nothing. I've just been gradually losing altitude. So there are a few more clouds out here I can reach before I have to commit to Colorado City and see what happens. I'm working really hard in this little thermal right near my airport here, Colorado City, averaging only 2 to 2.5 knots, which is low for the day, but it is getting late and getting weak. But this thermal could be the difference between making it one airport farther and not. The computer now says I have the next airport made with 500 feet. That's not enough for comfort, for sure, for an airport that's 28 miles away. If I can get another 500, I'll think about it. Another 1,500, 1,000 or 1,500, and I'd definitely go. And I have the airport under me made with 5,000 feet. I'm basically 5,000 feet straight above it, so I can go several more miles east looking for another thermal if this one doesn't get me high enough. So this is good. This was a good find where I needed it before the stress level got too high. We'll see if it gets me there. Well, the thermal over the Colorado City Airport, right there now, didn't quite go high enough to comfortably get me to the next airport, but it got me an arrival altitude of 1,000 feet, so that's almost enough from this distance. I'm now 24 miles from it. But so I headed east. 2 or 3 clouds later, found this small thermal I'm working at the moment, again averaging 2 to 2.5 knots. Just need another 1,000 feet or so to comfortably be able to make the jump 24 more miles. That will very likely be the end of the day, though I'll try to go farther. There's no guarantee I'm away from Colorado City yet, though. So we'll see. Well, I am really having to claw my way to this next airport. I've just, gotten a 100 or 200 feet under a little wispy cloud, not much more, and move on to do the same under another. One after another. I finally have an arrival altitude there of 1,800 feet from 16 miles out. I'm comfortable with that, especially late in the day over flat land with a benign looking sky like this.
So I'm moving on, but I still have the safety of Colorado City only 11 miles behind me, and I have it made with 3,000 feet still. So I don't have to completely commit to Avenger yet, but unless the glide really starts eroding unexpectedly fast, I should make it. Still not a sure thing though. 16 miles to go. Well, after 5 miles of gliding, I'd only lost 100 feet of my arrival altitude, so I was, I've committed now to going on to Avenger, and I stopped. Oh, by the way, look at all those windmills. Wow, wind turbines, whatever. All over the place. But I've stopped in this little bit of lift to give myself a little more insurance. Why not? There's no chance of making it to the next airport. It's just a little over an hour before sunset, and I would need about 8,000 feet more to make that next airport. So this is it. I won't make it farther than this, and I might as well get all the insurance altitude I can and make absolutely sure I get there, and get there with a lot of altitude to scope it out and see what's up, and just enjoy the end of the day from up here. Let it cool down on the ground a bit. It is still hot down there, 95 degrees or so. Talk to you in a bit. And there's where I'll land pretty soon. I got here plenty high to scope it out, figure out which runway to use, pattern direction, tune the radio for traffic, listen to a weather update, and I'll fly a big arc around it, making it easy on the next flight, the flight out of here, to stitch that flight together with this one, to have that flight's track cross this flight's track. That's another benefit of getting here high. Make the next flight start a little easier. You can see out ahead of me to the east, there's pretty much nothing left but darkness. It's a little under an hour till sunset. And the team just texted me that they're about half an hour out, so the timing should work well. I'll probably get on the ground just in time to figure out how to lead them back to where I am. Fun stuff. I'm so glad to have finally made it away from Brownfield. It's a nice town, but that's not the point of this adventure. To find a nice town and hang out in it for weeks is not the point. The point is to keep moving. Good times. Avenger traffic, glider Quebec Victor, turning final, 17, Avenger.
Landing at Sweetwater was no big deal. It was fairly late in the day. It was a little breezy, but not as breezy as I've landed in before on this trip. There was no traffic, so I had the place to myself. There was a big blimp on the ground that I saw as soon as I approached the area. I got there plenty high. It was 40 or 50 miles to the next airport and too late in the day, so there was no chance of making it one more airport farther. So I was there for 10 or 15 minutes just flying around the area. So after I landed, I pushed the glider off the runway as usual, and Julie and Diane showed up pretty quickly. But yeah, there was a blimp there. A crew of people were out there securing it, I guess, and had tethered it to the ground. The airport manager was very welcoming, welcomed us into their airport hangar. Even invited us to put the trailer in there. So we put the assembled glider and the trailer in the hangar, and we're just rolling out of there after sunset. We got to see the full moon rise from inside this hangar over a blimp that was lit from within. It was really, the airport manager said, "This has been a strange day here." And I guess he was right.